My fiancée said she was just grabbing coffee with classmates. That night, I found her drunk on the floor of a student party and got a video of her dancing half-naked with two guys before slipping into a room with them. When I checked the door she went into, I had learned to trust routines because they made life predictable. Elena studying late, me working long hours, dinners pushed back, weekends postponed. It was not romantic, but it was stable, and stability mattered more than drama. That was what I kept telling myself while paying most of the rent and quietly covering her tuition gaps when grants ran late. We were engaged, building towards something, and sacrifice was supposed to be part of that. That night started like every other weekday evening. Elena said she was meeting classmates for coffee after a late seminar. She mentioned it casually while putting on a jacket, already half distracted, scrolling through her phone. Nothing in her tone suggested secrecy or urgency. Just coffee. I nodded, went back to reviewing invoices on my laptop, and expected her home within 2 hours. The first sign that something was off was not panic. It was silence. 1 hour passed. Then 2. My messages stayed unread. I told myself her phone was dead or she was still talking, because that explanation required the least effort. At a little after 10, my phone buzzed, and I expected it to be her. Instead, it was Mason Clark, someone I barely knew outside of mutual gatherings. His message was short and awkward, asking if Elena was with me and whether everything was okay. I responded immediately, saying she had gone out for coffee. Mason did not reply right away. When he did, his wording changed. He said he had seen her near campus, very drunk, at a student party that was already out of control. He added that people were filming and that she had arrived with two guys whose names he did not know. I did not overthink it. I grabbed my keys and left. The address Mason sent was a rental house 2 blocks from student housing. By the time I arrived, the street was crowded, cars parked half on the sidewalk, music bleeding through walls. Someone had overturned a trash can near the curb. People were laughing loudly, spilling drinks, shouting over each other. This was not coffee. Inside, the house smelled like alcohol and sweat. I pushed past a group of people arguing about music and moved room to room, scanning faces. Someone recognized me and froze. That reaction alone confirmed everything before I saw her. Elena was on the living room floor, leaning against a couch, shoes off, hair tangled, eyes unfocused. A drink had spilled near her hand. She looked up at me slowly, trying to process what she was seeing. Around her, no one looked surprised that I was there. They looked uncomfortable, like witnesses who had already decided how this would end. I helped her sit up, trying to get a sense of how intoxicated she was. She was not unconscious, not incoherent, just drunk enough to lose judgment and balance. As I was doing that, a guy I later learned was Riley Novak stepped closer and said we needed to talk. He held up his phone without asking permission. The video started earlier that evening. Elena was standing on a table, laughing, shirt pulled low, dancing between 2 men. She was not being pulled or cornered. She was leading, touching, pulling them closer, performing for the room. The camera angle shifted as people cheered. Then the video followed her walking down a hallway with the same 2 men, one on each side. She turned once, smiled at the camera, and disappeared into a bedroom. Riley stopped the video and said everyone there had seen it. He said it was already being shared. I looked down the hallway and saw the closed door at the end, the same one from the video. Music thumped from behind it. People were gathered nearby, phones out, pretending to mind their own business while documenting everything. I walked to the door and knocked once. No response. I tried the handle. Locked. Behind me, Elena was trying to stand again, mumbling that she had only gone out for a bit, that it was not what it looked like. Her words were slurred but intentional. She was not confused about who I was or why I was there. She was confused about how to regain control of the situation. The door opened suddenly. Kyle Mercer stepped out first, shirt half-buttoned, face flushed. Behind him was Landon Pierce, adjusting his belt, avoiding eye contact. They both froze when they saw me, not in fear, but in calculation. They were deciding whether denying everything or admitting part of it would cost them less. People started recording openly now. No one tried to stop it. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else told them to calm down. Elena stood unsteadily and demanded to leave. I did not argue. I took her out of the house and into the car while campus security sirens echoed somewhere in the distance. On the drive home, she shifted between silence and fragmented explanations. She said she had lost track of time. She said people had pressured her. She said she thought I would not care because I was always busy. None of it lined up, but I did not interrogate her. I did not need to. The evidence existed independently of whatever story she wanted to tell. At the apartment, she fell asleep on the couch almost immediately. I sat at the kitchen table, replaying the video Riley had sent me afterward, watching details I had missed the first time. Her expression, her body language, the way she looked directly at the camera before walking into that room. That look stayed with me longer than anything else. My phone buzzed again. Messages from numbers I did not recognize. People sending clips, screenshots, comments. Someone forwarded a group chat where the video was being discussed in real time. Someone else warned me that campus security had logged the party and that names would be taken. By morning, this was no longer a private issue. It was documented, shared, timestamped, and discussed by people who had no loyalty to either of us. When Elena woke up, she claimed she remembered almost nothing. She said she had been drunker than she realized. She said she trusted the wrong people. She asked me why I had let strangers film her instead of protecting her. The shift was immediate. Responsibility moved away from her in every sentence. I told her I had seen the video. I told her others had seen it too. I told her this was not something that could be erased by explanation. She went quiet then, not in remorse, but in calculation again. Later that morning, campus security called. They asked neutral questions. They said there had been a report involving her name and asked whether she was safe. The call ended politely, but the implication was clear. This night had already crossed into official territory. By noon, Mason called to say this was not the first party like this. He said people on campus knew she was engaged and joked about it openly. He said he felt guilty for not saying anything sooner. I thanked him and hung up. I looked at the engagement ring on the counter, where she had taken it off the night before. For the first time since proposing, it felt like an object instead of a promise. By the end of that day, I understood something important. The betrayal was not just personal. It was public, documented, and already shaping its own consequences. What happened next would not be controlled by emotions or arguments, but by timelines, witnesses, and decisions already made. I did not sleep that night. Not because of shock, but because the situation had already moved past the point where sleep would help. Phones buzzed constantly. Messages arrived from people I had never met, some pretending to be supportive, others simply curious. The video was everywhere. Every version was cropped differently, but the sequence never changed. Elena dancing, Elena smiling at the camera, Elena walking into the room. No amount of explanation could rearrange that order. By morning, Elena was awake before me. She sat at the kitchen table wrapped in a blanket, scrolling through her phone with a fixed expression that looked less like fear and more like concentration. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was trying to understand what people were saying about her. That answer told me more than she realized. Her concern was not what she had done, but how it was being framed. She said she did not remember much after the first drink. She said she had trusted people she should not have. She said the video made it look worse than it was. I let her talk. Interrupting would have only slowed her down. As she spoke, her version shifted subtly. Sometimes she was pressured. Sometimes she was careless. Sometimes she suggested I should have picked her up earlier, as if timing would have changed choices she had already made. Before noon, campus security called again. This time they asked to speak to Elena directly. They explained that the house had been flagged for multiple violations and that names mentioned in recordings would be contacted. Elena's voice changed after the call. The confidence drained out of it, replaced by irritation. She said this was getting blown out of proportion. She said people were exaggerating because they liked drama. I left the apartment and met Riley Novak at a cafe near campus. He did not look comfortable being involved, but he was steady. He told me he had known Elena longer than I had, and that he had seen her at other parties over the last month. He said she always claimed she was single, or that her relationship was basically over. He said people laughed about it because they assumed I was imaginary or irrelevant. He showed me messages from a group chat where Elena had posted selfies from different nights, always vague, always just enough to suggest freedom. He pointed out timestamps that matched nights she had told me she was studying late. The pattern was obvious once it was visible. The lie had not been impulsive. It had been maintained. On my way back, Hannah Lowell called me. She introduced herself carefully, like someone stepping into a legal matter without intending to. She said she was one of the people who helped organize the party. She said Elena had asked about it days in advance and had requested that Kyle Mercer and Landon Pierce be there. She said Elena had chosen her outfit earlier that afternoon and joked about being engaged only on paper. By the time I returned home, Elena was on the phone with her parents. She spoke loudly, pacing, describing the situation in fragments that centered her as someone overwhelmed by pressure. When she noticed me listening, she lowered her voice and moved into the bedroom. I did not follow. An hour later, her parents called me directly. They were calm, but their questions carried assumptions. They asked about my behavior. They asked whether I had been supportive lately. They asked whether I had made her feel trapped. I answered factually. I told them where I had been that night. I told them what time she left. I told them how I found her. I told them the video existed and that others had seen it before I did. There was a pause on the line after that. They said they would come by the next day. In the afternoon, Elena's tone shifted again. She said she felt unsafe. She said the situation had made her realize how controlling the environment around her had become. She suggested staying with a friend for a few days. She suggested I should take responsibility for escalating things by showing up at the party. The idea that my presence had caused the exposure rather than her actions was introduced carefully, like a test balloon. That evening, an email arrived from the university. It was formal and neutral. It stated that Elena had been named in a report involving a student gathering and that a preliminary review would take place. It requested her presence for a meeting. She read it twice, then accused me of contributing to this by talking to people. I told her I had not needed to talk. Others had done that already. The next morning, her parents arrived. They came prepared for confrontation and were visibly surprised by the quiet of the apartment. I showed them the video without commentary. I showed them the messages Riley and Hannah had shared. I showed them timestamps, locations, and names. I did not argue. I did not explain. I let the sequence speak for itself. Elena tried to interrupt, but her father raised his hand. Her mother asked one question, asking whether the people involved would confirm what they had sent. I told her they already had. Later that day, Elena attended the university meeting alone. She returned furious. She said they were treating her like a case file. She said they did not care about her feelings. She said someone had mentioned her engagement during the meeting and that it felt humiliating. She said she felt betrayed by everyone. I listened and said nothing. That night, a new message surfaced in one of the group chats. It was from Aaron Pike, someone who had not spoken publicly before. He stated that Elena had been the one initiating contact, and that she had been sober enough to know what she was doing. He attached screenshots where she asked him to delete messages earlier that week. The chat exploded. People reacted. Someone forwarded it to me without comment. When I showed Elena the screenshots, she said they were taken out of context. She said Aaron was lying to protect himself. She said this was all becoming unfair. She asked me what I wanted to do now. That was the first time she had asked that question. I told her I wanted the truth documented. I told her I wanted no more improvisation. I told her I would not lie for her, to her parents, or anyone else. I told her that whatever happened next would happen based on what existed, not what she wished people believed. She went quiet then. Not emotional, not angry. Strategic. By the end of the second day, the narrative had shifted again. This time, not because she changed it, but because it was no longer hers to control. The university had records. Students had evidence. Parents had seen enough. The engagement was no longer a private promise, but a variable in an official review. And I understood something else clearly. The most dangerous part of this was not what had already happened, but what she might try next to protect herself. That realization came just before everything escalated. The shift happened quietly, which made it more dangerous. Elena stopped arguing details and started asking procedural questions. She wanted to know who I had spoken to, what I had shared, and whether anything had been saved outside group chats. She asked how universities handled complaints and whether parents could intervene. None of it sounded emotional. It sounded tactical. 2 days after the meeting, I received an email from the university requesting my presence as a relevant party. The wording was careful, but the implication was clear. Something new had been introduced. When I arrived, an administrator explained that Elena had expressed concerns about pressure and emotional control, suggesting that my appearance at the party had escalated the situation. They emphasized neutrality, but neutrality has gravity. Once an allegation exists, it changes the atmosphere. I did not react. I handed them a timeline. Messages, call logs, ride confirmations, the original video file with metadata intact, and statements from Riley Novak and Hannah Lowell confirming Elena's planning and initiation. I included the screenshots Aaron Pike had shared. I did not editorialize. I let Sequence do the work. The administrator nodded, thanked me, and said they would continue their review. That afternoon, Elena told her parents I was trying to ruin her academic future. They called me again, this time sharper, asking why I could not let the matter stay private. I explained that it was no longer private the moment it was filmed, shared, and reported. I explained that I had not filed anything. I had only responded. That evening, Aaron Pike asked to meet. We chose a public place. He looked exhausted. He said Elena had contacted him after the party, panicked, asking him to confirm she had been taken advantage of. He said he refused. He showed me additional messages where she tried to coach him on what to say if questioned. He said he did not want trouble and had no interest in being dragged into a story that was not true. The next morning, the university informed Elena that her housing access was suspended pending review due to conduct concerns and conflicting statements. She packed quickly, angrily, accusing me of celebrating her inconvenience. I said nothing. Her parents arrived and helped her move. The apartment felt larger after they left, quieter in a way that felt permanent. Within 48 hours, the review expanded. Kyle Mercer and Landon Pierce were contacted. Kyle tried to minimize his involvement. Landon said little. Aaron confirmed his statement formally. Riley and Hannah submitted theirs. The weight shifted decisively. Elena's parents asked for another meeting. This time, it was not confrontational. They asked for clarity. I showed them the complete timeline again, including messages Elena had sent while telling me she was studying. Her mother asked why Elena would risk everything. I said I could not answer that. Her father asked whether I still intended to marry her. I said no. The ring changed hands without ceremony. That same day, Elena filed a complaint accusing me of harassment through third parties. The university acknowledged receipt and folded it into the existing review. This did not help her. It widened the scope. I moved methodically. I canceled the venue and recovered deposits. I separated shared accounts. I removed her as beneficiary where applicable. These were not revenge actions. They were administrative corrections to a situation that no longer existed. Elena tried a different angle. She contacted mutual friends, suggesting I was cold and punitive. Most did not respond. Some forwarded me messages she had sent them, asking for support. The contrast between those messages and the evidence already circulating only hardened opinions. A week after the party, the university issued a preliminary decision. Elena was suspended pending a formal conduct hearing. Her expected graduation date was removed from the system. Housing privileges were revoked until further notice. The students involved received notices of their own, with varying sanctions. Elena called me from her parents' house. She asked to meet privately. She said she wanted to explain without administrators or witnesses. I declined. She accused me of enjoying this. I ended the call. Her parents called later and asked whether there was anything that could be done to mitigate the outcome. I told them mitigation depended on honesty, not persuasion. They thanked me for being direct. By the end of the week, the story had solidified, not because of rumors, but because institutions do not run on sympathy. They run on documentation. Elena had tried to flip the board too late, and the pieces were already set. I understood then that escalation was not about shouting or confrontation. It was about who moved first, who recorded accurately, and who resisted the urge to improvise when pressure arrived. The final consequences had not landed yet, but the direction was no longer in doubt. The silence afterward was not peaceful. It was administrative. Emails replaced arguments. Notifications replaced conversations. Everything that followed happened without raised voices, without dramatic confrontations, and without any need for performance. The system did what systems do when information is complete. 2 weeks after the party, the university scheduled Elena's formal conduct hearing. She did not attend in person. Her parents went instead, accompanied by an advisor who had clearly been briefed too late. The evidence packet was already assembled. Video files, metadata, witness statements, message logs, timelines. The sequence had been locked in long before anyone tried to negotiate its meaning. The decision arrived 3 days later. Elena was suspended for a full academic year with conditions for reentry that included mandatory counseling, a conduct review, and the loss of all campus housing priority. Her program required continuous enrollment. That requirement no longer applied to her. Her graduation date was no longer delayed. It was undefined. Kyle Mercer received probation and lost eligibility for certain campus programs. Landon Pierce was barred from on-campus events for the remainder of the year. Aaron Pike, having cooperated early and consistently, received a warning and no further action. The distinction was clear and documented. Elena's parents asked me to meet one last time. We sat in a quiet restaurant during an off hour. They did not argue. They did not defend. They asked practical questions about finances, about the lease, about whether I intended to pursue anything further. I told them no. I said the situation had already resolved itself. Her father nodded slowly, like someone finally accepting a diagnosis. I moved out of the apartment at the end of the month. Not because I had to, but because staying would have meant preserving a space that no longer represented anything real. I transferred my job closer to another branch office and signed a short-term lease without ceremony. No dramatic farewell. Just keys returned, boxes loaded, and a chapter closed without commentary. Elena attempted to contact me 3 times after the suspension became public. Once by email, once through Mason, once through an unknown number that left a voicemail asking for closure. I did not respond. Closure is not something another person grants. It is something you construct when there is nothing left to clarify. Mutual acquaintances gradually stopped asking questions. The story had resolved into a version that no longer required speculation. People moved on. They always do. What stayed behind were records, reputations, and consequences that did not care about intentions. 3 months later, I received a forwarded message from Hannah Lowell without context. It was a screenshot of a group chat Elena had posted in, asking whether anyone knew of programs that would accept transfer credits after suspension. The replies were minimal and unhelpful. No one was cruel. No one needed to be. I did not feel satisfaction reading it. I felt distance. The wedding venue refunded most of the deposit. The caterer refunded half. The photographer refunded nothing. I absorbed the loss without resentment. It was cheaper than pretending. The ring was sold quietly. The money went into an account that had no shared history attached to it. I ran into Elena once, accidentally, months later. She was working part-time at a place near campus that served students she was no longer one of. We acknowledged each other with brief nods. No words were exchanged. None were necessary. The version of her that existed in my life no longer existed at all. The strangest part was not the betrayal. It was how quickly reality replaced emotion once documentation entered the picture. Once timelines exist, arguments lose power. Once witnesses speak, narratives collapse. Once institutions move, individuals become irrelevant to the outcome. People sometimes ask me whether I regret showing up at that party. They frame it as a fork in the road, as if absence would have preserved something. I do not answer directly. Regret assumes an alternative worth preserving. I do not believe there was one. What happened did not destroy a future. It revealed that the future being discussed had never been shared. And that was the only part that mattered.
Exactly what they were doing. And I had to be the one in charge. And I was 20, telling everybody what to do. And those were the days where people were, we would do full-blown carving roast beef and making hot fudge sundaes and making baked potatoes in the aisle and orchestrating this whole meal service. So it was like running a restaurant.
Oh, wow.
At 30,000, 40,000 feet in the air.
Where did you get that confidence? Because I think for us, like, obviously we're young women, we're just starting our careers. And I mean, like, we moved to New York City very recently and like we didn't know anyone.
Nobody.
And Phoebe was like,
Right.
we need to go out there.